So recently I read this book called House of Leaves, and I wanted to talk about it. It's an interesting story. It's different than your modern setup for a story because it holds a lot of different perspectives and almost like storylines, if you'd call it that. It also has a play on like the idea behind a creepypasta because when you think of a creepypasta, you think of something you think of someone going, "Oh, well, I heard this story down from my father, and his father told his father, and it's this old urban legend, but it happened to me." Or you could think of it as, "Oh, well, I found this tape in this old box in my attic, and I played it, and all of a sudden my tablet is cursed," or whatever. You can take it anyway, and that's kind of how the story feels. So the whole thing sets up with this guy named Johnny. Johnny has this friend who cares for this old guy, and the old guy passes away from slight mysterious circumstances, but police say it was just a heart attack, so not too much to worry about. And this old guy was blind. His name was Zarimo. So this old guy named Zarimo, this old blind guy named Zarimo, passed away. And Johnny's friend asked him if he wanted to take anything from his apartment, because Zarimo doesn't have any living relatives and Johnny's friend doesn't want any of this stuff, so he's asking him. And so Johnny goes and he finds this giant box. And in this box are a bunch of letters and transcripts and put together writings that this old guy Zarimo did. And Johnny takes the box. Well, Johnny also makes note that in this old guy's house, in Zarimo's house, it's just weird. He recalls it as being creepy. There's paper over all the windows and the vents, and Zarimo had taken a measuring tape and measured from one wall to the other wall and was watching it. There's claw marks on the floor. There's candles everywhere. They're like just strange things. And, Johnny doesn't think too much of it, and he takes these writings and he puts it together. And this is the story that Johnny is telling. He is retelling and re-putting together the works that Zarimo did. Well, what were the papers about? So Zarimo talks about this old project, this old movie project, documentary-styled movie project that was made called the Navison Project. And we'll talk about that in a second. But Zarimo basically did a narrative where he did a commentary on the Navison Project, a documentary for a documentary. And the Navison Project was this story of this guy and his wife and their 2 children in this house that got bigger on the inside. The whole thing is that this Navison Project was not real, and Johnny remarks several times in his part of the story when he does his little notations. He talks about how these people that Zarimo cites and these works, that the commentary that other people did on the Navison Project, he's like, these people didn't exist. And this is the story of House of Leaves. And you follow it, and it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. It's a huge rabbit hole. Really, really cool book. I don't really know how I felt about it. I almost feel like I'd rather read it a second time, but instead of reading it page for page, I'd rather follow different stories. Because you could either read all of Zarimo's writings, you could read all of Johnny's writings, or you could read the actual Navison Project. And yeah, I read it all together, which I'm starting to think I shouldn't have done, but it was a really, really cool story. It's definitely a different type of reading, like a weird reading medium that I didn't think I'd get through. It's a big book, especially because it switches between different POVs and different times. It's definitely different, but the book is really, really good. At its core, it's a very fun book to read. It's also, I will say though, it is grueling. It is hard to get through at points. There's a lot of yawning portions where it's really hard to read. But you kind of embrace it at points. It really is fun. to read, and I feel like it's more of a achievement to be able to say, ah, yes, I read that book and I finished it. I won't tell you some of the major details because maybe you want to read it and you don't want me to spoil it for you. It's a very interesting book and it follows a lot of interesting things. It's interesting. I haven't read too many books this year, which is different for me, but after reading House of Leaves, I immediately picked up Priory of the Orange Tree, which is way bigger, but I read it in like less than a week because I think it just, when you read House of Leaves, everything feels infinitely easier to read. And so it was almost like, oh well, I can read everything now that I've read that. And that's true. It is true. And I loved Priory too, as well. But that's for a different episode. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that for a second. I really did enjoy the story. It's so different and weird. I loved it because it had a very poetry style movement with how they put the words on the page. Sometimes it's only one word. Sometimes it's, if while the one person is getting into a smaller and smaller space, there's less and less words on the page, and it's very cool. I really enjoyed it. I'll only give it like an 8 out of 10 because it was really hard for me to finish. I feel like if I reread it, I'd probably have a better time. And so yeah, that is my little commentary on House of Leaves, and I still highly recommend anyone to give it a shot. If it's hard for you to keep an attention span while reading, it might not be your book. Because I have a pretty solid attention span while reading, and even I was struggling. And I don't think it's the type of book to read while reading other books. I feel like you'd get confused, and when you'd go back to House of Leaves, you'd be like, oh wait, I forgot who this character is, or I forgot what they were doing before, because it's such a wild goose chase, it feels like. But either way, I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys are having an amazing day, week, month, year. And if you guys have if you guys have read House of Leaves and you have any part that's your favorite, please tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear all your guys' thoughts and feelings and opinions. Well, that's all for me. Goodbye!